everyone, it's me, Wayne. I'm back, been gone a while. Let's talk about Digimon. Digimon was always that strange series that I really liked growing up, but the extent to which I could interact with it was limited. I was introduced to the franchise through the anime, seeing a couple of episodes of the show on TV, and from there, I tried to find a few other ways to get into the series. I collected the trading cards, I remember having one or two of these transforming toys, and of course, I had a couple of the VHS tapes, including one for the movie, which I enjoyed more when I was a kid, but still kind of have a soft spot for. But beyond that, it was kind of hard to be a really die-hard fan of Digimon when I was younger, as I wasn't really watching the newer shows as they aired, and there wasn't a lot of merch out there. If anything, it's easier to be a fan of the series now that I'm an adult, with new series like Ghost Games streaming, tons of new collectibles, stuff like model kits, and it really feels like the franchise has grown up with us, with the newer material in the anime actively acknowledging how much we've grown since we started watching Digimon Adventure back in the day. One aspect of the series I didn't get a chance to take part of until I was older was the video games. I don't even remember seeing many of them advertised when I was a kid. In fact, I didn't actually get a chance to play my first one until I was in college, and my roommate at the time introduced me to Cyber Sleuth for the PS4. I'm not sure where I saw it, but I do remember seeing ads for this one Digimon game, the first one in fact, and I was excited at first when I saw this floating around as a kid because it was for the PS1 and I had a PS2 I could play it on. But I was also a child and wasn't allowed to play T-rated games, and trust me, we're gonna get into why this game having that rating is ridiculous. But I'm older now, I pay for my own video games, and besides, I'm pretty sure I can handle anything this has to throw at me. And I paid a pretty good penny to get this in my hands too, so is it gonna be worth it to finally satiate my curiosity that's been building for over 20 years now? I sure hope so. In terms of story, there's not a lot to spoil here, but spoiler alert, this is Digimon World for the PlayStation. Just look at this thing. I normally go out of my way to collect black labels for my PS1 games, but I've yet to find one in as good a condition as this greatest hits copy, so here we are for now. Can't deny how cool it is to finally have this in my collection. That image of Metal Greymon was striking. It's no wonder they decided to use this for the American box art. It's a legitimately awesome render, and oh boy, what a tagline on some of these ads. May not be suitable for people who suck at video games. I can tell you right now, it took some stones for this game to come right out of the gate swinging like that, especially since a lot of advertisements at the time weren't really showing off what the game actually was, and all the marketing seemed super vague. I do have to say though, as much as I like this American box art, I was shocked the other day when I finally saw the Japanese box art for the first time, and are you kidding me right now? This is amazing! I'm pretty sure this was done by Kenji Watanabe, an insanely talented artist who did a lot of early artwork for much of the Digimon franchise, and I believe even designed several of the creatures. I do wish the States had more confidence in box art like this, but still, what we got over here does beat out what they went with in Europe, which honestly looks like repurposed images used for merchandise from the anime. Like, this would have been the stock image to use on the tags of plushies or t-shirts. Alright, before we keep getting too sidetracked, let's lay down the premise. We've got this kid living in Japan where apparently all the cool kids like to hang out and play with their V-Pets, comparing what they've raised and pitting them against each other in a fight. It's a little hard to ignore that the CG in these cutscenes are, well, look, this game clearly had some budgetary constraints, alright? Not every studio was swimming in money. It is kind of funny hearing Mona Marshall voicing the main character here, since she also provided the English voice for Izzy in the English dub for the original anime. Or Koshiro Izumi? Sorry, this won't be the last time you hear me using the localized names in regards to this franchise. But another key thing to take note of here are these little keychains hosting their little creatures known as Digimon, because believe it or not, understanding these devices, how they work, and their history with the Digimon franchise is essential for understanding this game. I think the premise of this game alone would have confused me as a kid, because I think I always assumed it was based on the anime, and it's not. It actually predates that show by a couple of months. It's actually not based on any pre-existing manga, anime, trading card game, nothing like that, no. It's based on this. Remember Tamagotchi? I had one of these as a kid. It was cool, he was my little buddy. The thing had flames on it. And I'm pretty sure I accidentally left it somewhere in my friend Ethan's van, and it's likely been lost to the tides of time or, you know, between the seats. It was a virtual pet, or V-Pet. You would feed him, teach him lessons, clean up his poop on occasion. It was just a neat little, well, virtual pet that you would take care of, and depending on the level of care you gave it and what its base form was, it would grow into a variety of different creatures until inevitably passing on to the big motherboard in the sky. Death comes for us all, and your adorable pixelated bundle of innocence is no exception. Also, I feel like I wouldn't be very good at my job if I talked about the virtual pet craze and I didn't mention Sonic Adventure, and of course the Dreamcast virtual memory unit. This thing is amazing. I love this. I know that the GameCube ports of Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 also had something like this, but the Dreamcast version has always been my favorite. But you had these little creatures in Sonic Adventure that you could find and raise. They had a whole like garden for them, and then you could dump them onto your memory card, and the VMU, the portable memory card for the Dreamcast, it was like its own little like gaming handheld, and it was basically just a little Tamagotchi. Look at him! Look! This little guy! He's hanging out, he's on my thing. This is fantastic, I love it! At some point or another though, the company that created these little guys, Bandai, decided they wanted a spin on the Tamagotchi that was easier to market to young boys, and from that idea, Digimon was born. They had this cool brick design, the creatures inside them were still cute, but would evolve into much edgier and fearsome forms, and when you train them up enough, you could even have them battle with your friend's Digimon. It wasn't a complicated battle strategy, it was mostly a predetermined outcome that was decided as the devices were linked, and compared the stats from each creature with, I think, a little RNG thrown in there. Watching the battle actually take place was something of a formality. But yeah, this is the concept that the rest of the franchise was born from, and certain aspects of Digimon and other media would take their own liberties with these ideas, like the anime taking a more linear approach to the evolution of each creature, but plenty of other aspects of this franchise have held on to the roots of these original V-Pets. There was even a new line of toys released for the franchise's 20th anniversary, with new designs being launched over the years, and this Greymon pattern is probably my favorite. Even now, the recent anime series Digimon Ghost Game ties in the newest evolution of these V-Pet devices known as the Bandai Vital Bracelet, a real-life accessory that you can use as a weird sort of hybrid between an original V-Pet and, I guess, a Fitbit. Raising your Digimon not so much by feeding them or cleaning up their waste, but by training yourself with it through physical activity, not just by tracking your steps, but also various other exercises. It's a really creative way to evolve the old V-Pet idea for adults with jobs that can't spend every minute feeding their fake pet. Okay, so like one of the really cool things about this Vital Bracelet is that you should be able to interact with these with somebody else's and have your Digimon fight each other, kind of like you could with the old V-Pets, but if you want to just initiate random battles, all you need is something with an NFC reader that's giving off an active signal, and then it acts like there's something inside of that device that's like, you know, it's infested with a hostile Digimon, and yours is fighting it. It even works with the new 3DS XL because it has an NFC reader for the amiibos, and so, you know, you can be like, oh no, there's a bad Digimon inside my 3DS. Isn't that crazy? That's so weird. That's so nuts. You know, it's just one more cool thing about the 3DS. You know, people have been telling me lately that's actually really easy to mod these. All in all, it's just cool to see that even after decades have passed and this series has entered so many other forms of media that frankly, it's probably more well known for, it still feels like the origins of this franchise have always held a sort of importance. And a shining example is Digimon World. I can't speak for the original developers or what their intentions were, but just based on what I've been able to gather after playing it, it seems like what they were going for was taking these original Digimon virtual pets and adapting this concept into an adventure game. And it works. To a degree. From here, you get to name your main character, and a lot of fans will recognize him as Mameo. Or is it Mameo? Mameo? Anyway, it relates to something we'll talk about someday. But in this title, he's really just recognized as the analog kid, or really whatever you name him. When he gets home, he notices his Digivice, it was a term back then, leave me alone, is doing some weird stuff all on its own. Almost like it's come to life, and before he has time to question what's going on, he's sucked into the device and transported into the digital world.
How many of you have seen Tron? Huh? What, seriously? None of you have seen Tron?
Here, he's greeted by Digimon, a friendly elder Digimon who tells him about a sort of turmoil that started to wash over the digital world, affecting the memories of those inhabiting it and causing them to scatter this vast island to segregate from their once unified home. He enlists a Digimon partner to you and asks for your help in bringing the various Digimon from across the island back here to File City to rebuild and help thwart the looming and mysterious peril he knows is coming. A peril they don't have any name for besides vaguely referring to it as the emergency. You essentially have one larger overarching objective here, recruiting more Digimon to File City, but in order to do that, you'll need to get accustomed to the main subject of this title's gameplay loop, raising your Digimon. I mean, there are a couple of simple things you can do outside of File City, a few weaker Digimon to fight, and even one or two that you can recruit to join the town, but before you go exploring too much, the first thing you want to do is train. Acquaint yourself with this mechanic now, because it's something you're going to be repeating for the entire rest of the experience. You're gonna start your adventure with either an Agumon or a Gabumon, arguably two of the most popular creatures in the series, and which one you get will depend on how you answer a couple of questions from Digimon at the beginning of the game. He also gives you an option to name your Digimon. What can I say? I'm a sucker for tradition. Now from here, you want to make sure to stock up on food, and sure, you can find some mushrooms hanging around the screen surrounding File City, but the best source of food for your digital friend is a farm run by a local Tanemon where they grow meat. I love this exchange too. Mameo questions hunks of cooked animal flesh just sprouting out of the dirt, and Tanemon's just like, "You're on our turf, pal. It's weird to expect that it wouldn't." And our little MC is just like, "Yeah, sure, that tracks." This open-minded mentality where he's willing to just accept that elements of this world don't play by the same rules he's accustomed to are honestly kind of refreshing. This kid's just like, "Dude, I got sucked into a keychain this morning. The word normal doesn't mean anything to me anymore." Tanemon will give you new rations of meat for every in-game day, and you'll want to continually stock up on this stuff because from here, once again, you need to train. Near the edge of the city is a location called the Green Gym. There are other gyms in this game, but I'm gonna be honest, this is the only one that matters. Here you can take your Digimon to a workout station and raise one of their stats: HP, MP, offense, defense, speed, or brains. Now, time is always moving forward in this game, and with every workout, an in-game hour passes. Usually, this is a real-world minute, and you can watch that full minute play out, but you can also just press the triangle button to speed past that process and jump right to the end of said hour. Each Digimon has a certain amount of time that needs to pass before they can evolve into their next form, and depending on what their stats are at the end of that time period, they'll evolve into one of several possible new forms. Each base Digimon has their own evolution tree dictating what they can grow into, when, and under what conditions, and after enough time passes, once you've raised it into either a champion or ultimate level Digimon, they'll die of old age and reform as an egg or Digitama of your choosing, giving you some agency over which evolution tree you want to train with. So let's say you start with this Digitama and hatch a Bodamon. You'll want to get a head start on a few of his stats, and after just a couple of hours, he'll evolve into a Koromon. Now this is where it starts to split, because after maybe one in-game day passes, your Koromon is going to evolve into either an Agumon or a Gabumon. This is depending on which stats have been given priority. Say for example, if you want an Agumon, you'll need to have Koromon's HP, MP, and offense take priority over his defense, speed, and brains, and vice versa if you want a Gabumon. Okay, now he's evolved and you have your Agumon, and I hope all of that made sense to you because now it can evolve into one of 6 different possible creatures. Okay, 7 if we're counting Numamon. More on him later. And this is where the interesting part kicks in. I don't know how my younger self would have responded to this game, mostly because the anime taught me what the paths of evolution were for each of these creatures, but the original V-Pets and by proxy Digimon World do not follow this logic. These evolutionary trees are not linear, and you have to have the stats for each possible outcome down to a science, and if you don't, good luck, because this game has no intention to walk you through that process. There's a sort of art to how a game can communicate its mechanics to the player, and this is a form of art that Digimon World seems to have a decent understanding of for just about everything outside of how evolution works, and given how crucial this process is to your progression, as you'll need to know how to raise specific Digimon to either deal with strong opponents in the overworld or complete missions that call for very specific creatures, this feels like more than just a slight oversight. I know there's a player's guide available for this game, but I've also heard that it's not even very reliable when it comes to accurately walking you through obtaining specific Digimon. I should address that there are some fans out there who hold to the idea that half the points, or half the fun of this title, is walking through the Digimon raising process blindly, doing your best to train them up in the way that makes sense to you and just seeing what they become. And I don't disagree, actually. You know what? I can see value in that, especially when you're first starting out in the game and can afford to take things a bit more casually. These evolution trees will lead you through the base Digimon to their more intermediate forms in a fairly natural way and aren't exactly the most demanding thing in the world. Getting a good champion level Digimon might not be too hard, and who knows, you might be surprised by how much you end up liking a certain creature that maybe you didn't even think much of before. Early on, I was sort of blindly making my way through the game, raising my little digital buddy and ended up raising him into a Birdramon, which was never really one of my go-to designs in the series, but I think we can all see a little appeal in a giant bird that's constantly set on fire and apparently can't afford good dental care. This guy stuck with me for a while though. He ended up being a really reliable partner to get me through some of the early game trials, able to blast through most battles, and I was able to clear a few recruitments because of it. I gained a new appreciation for Birdramon after that, something I probably wouldn't have had if I didn't raise that Digimon without knowing exactly what it would turn into. In fact, the first ultimate level Digimon I got was not one I would normally have gone after. I barely even give Andromon a second thought before playing this game, but now I love this guy. We've been through so much together. He helped me out in so many tough areas. I started to care about so many Digimon I never did before playing this game, like Betamon or Lekmon, the list goes on. And when Andromon finally had to fade away to begin this cycle anew, I felt something, you know? It felt like we really did have a sort of connection, and did he just dab on me on his way out? That said, trying to raise an ultimate level Digimon is a bit more complicated than a champion, and a large reason behind that is that its minimum required stats can be very high, and you are not going to guess what those requirements are. If you want to go into this blind for a bit and see what you get, it's all well and good. In fact, I recommend it for the early game. But I won't pretend for a minute that this should be the expectation for the whole game, not with the amount of time getting stronger Digimon can take even when you know what you're doing. I only mention this because I've actually seen some fans trying to ridicule people who try to get into this game nowadays for doing it wrong if they want to use a guide. I don't want to undercut this playstyle. There is value to it, and it's my recommendation that you start out this way during your first playthrough, but the mandatory purist mentality some players have with this stuff in this game or any other is barely logical. Guys, no. This is archaic, it's incredibly time-consuming, and in many cases, it's simply not going to be feasible in this day and age when we just don't have the time to sink into a game like this anymore. I mean, maybe when you were growing up with it, sure. I see this in a similar way to people who insist Metroid on the NES is a game that holds up 100% well with no map or guide of any kind, and no, dude. It's a lot to expect players nowadays to have the time, patience, or fortitude for that kind of crap when half the hallways all look the same. In the same way, I think Dragon Warrior, a game that came packaged with a partial guide, is best enjoyed with that guide. I think trying to evolve ideal creatures in Digimon World in a completely blind way should only be seen as an optional method for new players who might like playing it that way. Otherwise, and I really don't have any shame in saying this is a flaw in the game's design. One that I'm sure drove some kids absolutely crazy back in the day, because we're talking about one of the most fundamental elements of this game's structure. Not knowing how you need to properly train your partner to achieve one of several possible different evolutions can be crippling to the experience, but thankfully, we do have options nowadays with a helpful tool that I like to call the internet. I want to give a big ol' shout out to SydMontague, who put together this great evolution tool online, and I'll leave a link to it in this video's description. By inputting what Digimon you currently have with you, their stats, and which Digimon you want, this tool will tell you not only if that evolution is possible, but what you'll need to do to accomplish it and how your chances for that outcome fare against any others you could achieve. This thing is a godsend because it will walk you through all of the necessary criteria between tradable stats, weight, care mistakes, and bonus criteria like required discipline and happiness, or the amount of techniques you'll need to have taught your Digimon. Yeah, this is a lot of stuff. That's not just a prop for a gag, by the way. I took a lot of actual pen on paper notes for this video. This game is just so full of information. So let's start with the basics. What are care mistakes? Your buddy will communicate its needs to you, like when it needs to eat, when it needs to sleep, and when it needs to unload. When you see these little speech bubbles, you'll want to tend to these needs when they pop up, otherwise that will count as a care mistake. Then again, while some evolutions require that you have little to no care mistakes, some, like Skull Greymon, will require upwards of 10. You basically have to actively neglect your partner Digimon to get some of the most powerful creatures in this game. If you're going for a Digimon evolution that needs as few care mistakes as possible, you want to make sure you're taking care of all of its needs as soon as they come up. You'll have about until the end of the in-game hour to make sure that they get fed or go to sleep or unload, or else that will count as a care mistake. But the tricky thing is that this game doesn't really track them in any visible way for you. If you have to have care mistakes to get certain Digimon you want, my recommendation is to just go the poop route. It's way too easy to lose track of every time you've gone hungry or gotten overtired during a workout, but when you just neglect letting them use the toilet, the results are very visible. This is the reason the game got a T rating, by the way. Thing is, once your Digimon has left this stuff around, it doesn't go away. Not unless you evolve it into either a Numamon or a Sukamon, an evolution you obtain when you fail to meet the requirements for certain levels of Digimon, and I believe also triggered by care mistakes, and these things will clean it up for you. What a game. That's not all though, because another really important aspect of raising the right Digimon is their weight, and this is one of the harder things to control, but it's also one of the more lenient windows. You can raise a Digimon's weight by feeding it, but I would wait until they actually tell you they're hungry, and depending on what you feed them, like mushrooms are better for maintaining a control on their weight as it will only raise the stat by 1, but giving them meat could raise it by 2 or 3 depending on the size of the portion. Your Digimon will also lose a couple points of weight every time it uses the bathroom, so you have to use the power of math to use the lost weight to keep it under a certain limit, or feed them heftier food to circumvent the cost. That's a, weird way to put that. Now, why not just stuff this little guy's face full of hearty farm-grown sirloins? Well, because that would lower their happiness and discipline. That matters too. Kind of. Happiness and discipline are more like bonus criteria when it comes to attaining a particular Digimon evolution. A Digimon might require a particularly high discipline stat, like say 90% on their discipline to add to their meter. If you have the right stats for one evolution, but it also puts you close to the parameters of another evolution, this can act as something of a safety net. You can think of it as giving you bonus points of likelihood for turning into a particular form. There's several ways to raise these. One of the easiest is grinding for some bits, the currency of the game, and buying a bunch of low-level healing items. These can be fed to your Digimon without acting like food, so it won't contribute to their weight stat, but it also won't lower their happiness and discipline like force-feeding them an Arby sandwich does. There's a chance that your Digimon will refuse this item, in which case you can choose to scold them, which will offer a boost in both meters. There's a praise button too, and while it will raise your Digimon's happiness, it'll also lower their discipline. I guess you can't be letting these creatures get the idea that they're too loved and valued, can you?
Have you ever tried simply turning off the TV, sitting down with your children, and hitting them?
Another bonus criteria available to you is one that I didn't end up getting a lot of use out of because I think it mostly benefits players trying to raise a strong Digimon in the late game after doing a lot already, and that would be acquiring a certain amount of techs, which are essentially new attacks that your Digimon can learn by fighting certain other Digimon that already know those techs your buddy is capable of learning. It can take a lot of battles between a lot of Digimon, both yours and the ones you fight, as I guess they need to be lined up with the same pool of tech capabilities in order for them to pass it on, but you'll want to gain a lot of these just to make some strong evolutions a bit easier to get. I was bad at this one. I did not get a whole lot of techs in this game. And basically all of this stuff you gotta keep in mind while you train your little friend. Feed them, let them sleep, make sure that you didn't make them train too many times in a row or else they'll get exhausted. Take them to the John, make sure to get meat from the meat farm every every day, praise them, but not too much, and make sure you're battling a lot. Oh, that's right. How many times your Digimon is in battles? That's another bonus criteria. I completely forgot about that one. There is an undeniable quality to just raising one of these little guys. Starting off from the stages of their infancy, watching them grow into stronger and stronger forms, sometimes into ones you weren't directly aiming for or even hoping for, but there's still something to love there. A lot of kids growing up with this title would end up with the infamous green blob we know as Numamon because they didn't really understand how to achieve one of the next forms, but honestly, unless you're neglecting training altogether and just building up a lot of care mistakes, you're never really at as much of a risk of ending up with this Digimon as I was always led to believe. I think it just lends to the fact that this title just doesn't dish out its own rules in a very understandable way. Now, there are some Digimon forms that take special parameters to attain. They're not always the only requirements for getting a certain evolution, but it can act as something of a shortcut through that process, like using the golden banana to get Edamon, but there are some that just appear. I had a hard time trying to emulate this as it happened to me by complete accident the first time I picked up this game and I wasn't recording at the time, but I had a Gabumon and I took him into a battle that he ended up losing and turned into a Bakemon. Just a little ghost dude. Just a little guy. These circumstantial evolutions are interesting, especially when they catch you by surprise, and I'm sure there's some solid documentation out there on what they all are and how they're achieved, but they add just that one extra spin to this already pretty in-depth system. If you want to get every Digimon in the game, you're going to be doing a lot of legwork, especially since you only ever have one creature and need to work through its entire life cycle before you can take another crack at it. This is a very time-consuming process, like to an alarming degree, but it has its benefits. That said, raising your Digimon is only one part of the cycle, so what do you do once you've gotten your little buddy strong enough to venture outside of File City? Outside of File City, there are Digimon scattered all over the island in various biomes, living their lives in aimless wander, or dedicating themselves to some form of menial task. Those are just the recruitable Digimon though. The standard ones that you find out in the Overworld are there to battle. They'll just be sort of waddling around out there in their habitat, and for the most part, all you have to do is just watch their movement patterns, and if you don't want to fight, just gotta find an opening and move past them. If you end up making contact with one of them though, the game is gonna take a quick second to load in all the available information on each combatant, and if there are any more wild Digimon in that area, they may decide to either join the fight against you or get scared and run off. From here, every stat that you've trained for comes into play. Attack and defense are obvious, calculating how hard your Digimon can hit and the resilience it has to oncoming attacks from opponents. HP and MP are similar, managing the hit points available to your Digimon partner as well as their magic points. I'm gonna be honest, I'm pretty surprised they went with the standard RPG magic points for this one and not like data points or something more, digital monster related. But sure, this is something that your Digimon is going to need to tap into anytime that they want to use one of their techs, which make up their attack moveset. Some techs will cost more MP than others and will usually compensate that cost with a wider range or heavier attack power. Now, for the most part, you yourself aren't going to be doing a lot in these battles, as the outcome mostly relies on what your Digimon does with the tools at its disposal, and I think this has sort of understandably created the idea that the player doesn't have any real agency in these fights, thus making them kind of random, but that's really not the case, not as much as you might think anyway. And that's something held up especially well with the final two stats, speed and brains. A high speed stat will do what you might imagine, increasing the rate at which your Digimon will attack the opponent, and I know that sounds simple, but trust me, especially when you're surrounded by enemies, training your Digimon with a high speed stat is one of the best things you can ever do for it. I mean, you don't have to worry too much about it getting too hurt if it's wiping out your enemies before they can even get a good hit in, right? It's weirdly satisfying too. Like, sure, you can see the results of your Digimon being able to hit really hard, but it's easy to feel really proud of your little buddy watching them move around on the field and just absolutely juggling anyone they're up against because the other guy just can't react as fast as yours. It's not all perfect though. Sometimes it doesn't matter whose stats are what. I think the game just gets tired of processing so much information for a few seconds, and sometimes everybody on screen just kind of sits there and does nothing. Like, guys, come on. We got a fight going on here. Yeah, okay, there we go. Now, sometimes it's not quite enough to land an attack first. Some attack animations take longer than others, and depending on if it's a projectile move or not, an attack might be interrupted, but once the projectile is in the air, it's gonna hit. There are times when you'll actually want to be really mindful of when these animations are beginning and ending, because there is one attack you have direct control over, and that's tied to the finish gauge. Every Digimon has a finishing technique, and during each battle, you'll see the word finish complete itself letter by letter as time passes. Once it's filled, you'll see a prompt indicating that you can use it, and then you'll need to alternate between the L1 and R1 buttons really fast to bring it to maximum power. The finishing technique is going to be one of your best friends, because it can pack a ridiculous punch and be an absolute game changer if you ever find yourself struggling during a fight, and it doesn't cost any MP. Just need to fill that gauge up and you'll be able to launch it. But timing is important here, because if you start this thing and get hit during the process, your finishing technique is gone and you'll need to wait for it to fill up again before making another attempt to use it. Generally, I find it best to wait until your Digimon has been hit with an attack and gotten up from their recovery animation, as your opponent will need time before they can cycle into another attack, and if you initiate your finisher during that window, they'll be stuck, unable to move while you power it up, and won't be able to defend themselves from it. It's a great strategy to rely on, especially when you need to wrap up a fight and have run out of MP for basic techs. But if you need just a little more control over how these fights play out, you'll want to train up your Digimon's brain stat, as when you get it to high enough levels, you can call out to your pal during battles and instruct them on which tech to use in that moment depending on the ones that you've outfitted them with. When to stay on the defensive, when to use their own judgment, or when to flee from the battle altogether. As you learn how your Digimon's techs operate, how fast they are, how much ground they cover, how much MP they cost, and how effective they seem to be against certain opponents, this becomes a huge asset in gaining more control over each encounter, but you also can't forget the importance of using replenishing items. You can purchase or find items like these little floppy disks that will recover their HP or MP, each with their own set of ranging effectiveness depending on the size of the floppy. And you can toss these out to your Digimon partner in real time during battles, working immediately on contact. When you're out battling, especially when you're exploring deep beyond File City, you want to make sure to stock up on as many of these as you can, because you'd be surprised how quickly both your Digimon's health and MP can get drained, and outside of sleeping, which takes up several hours of your partner's limited lifespan, this is your best way of recovering these stats. These aren't the only recovery items though. There are others that can restore your Digimon from status ailments, like when they get hit with certain techs that can poison them, leave them with a lasting injury, stun them, or turn them into this old 8-bit version of themselves resembling how they look on the old V-Pet toys. Just shooting out these little pixels that do barely any damage. Like, the status effect can be annoying, but it's undeniably charming, and there is nothing more satisfying than an enemy doing this to your Digimon and their own HP is low enough that this basic little attack the sprite does actually takes them out. Now, these recovery items aren't exactly free. There are a few that you can find out in these monitors scattered throughout the world among other helpful items, but those are limited. The rest will have to be collected on the off chance an enemy drops one after being defeated, or buying them from shops, but obviously for that, you're gonna need bits. And this is one of the main draws for combat in this game. Because of the way training works, you don't really get a lot of experience points for downing foes, but winning battles is still one of the best ways to make money. You should remember that your main objective here is just a peaceful recruitment mission, but you are going to be doing some battling along the way, and if it's not just for mandatory story-based fights, it's usually going to be from trying to fill out your wallet a bit. And if you got a strong Digimon, you can stump through quite a few of these fights, pulling in a decent amount of dough along the way. There will be times when you might find yourself burning through cash faster than you're making it, especially when you're raising low-level Digimon who can't really fight, but try not to stress over it too hard, especially when you can rely on some really big payouts from major fights during quests. As you explore more of the island, you'll begin to encounter other Digimon with slightly more scripted places in the world. Maybe they're guarding something, maybe they're just irritable and need to be knocked around a little bit before they're willing to join the city. Maybe, like this little Patamon here, they might just have something to prove. Thing is, as you get further and further away from File City, these guys are gonna pack a bit more of a punch and you're gonna wanna exercise some caution. You really don't wanna lose in these tougher fights because the repercussions can actually actually be a lot worse than just losing time. For every evolution cycle, your Digimon has 3 lives, and every time they get knocked out during a battle, you have a small window where you can use a revive item to get them back up and running. Otherwise, they'll lose a life and be sent back to File City, and you may have even had some of your items stolen as well. Lose all 3 of those lives and your Digimon will die, reverting back to a cluster of data until forming back into a Digitama. And this, right here, this is bad. See, if a Digimon fades away out of old age, it's all good. They retain the ticks that they obtained throughout the journey, you get to choose the Digitama they form back into, and they'll hatch with some nice parameters. But if they fade away because they lost all 3 of their lives, they will form into a random Digitama, you don't get to choose, and they'll lose a portion of their learned techs, unable to carry them over into the next cycle. Oh, and your Tamer level goes down. Oh, right, Tamer level. We got another mechanic, guys. Your Tamer level is a way of tracking your success as, well, a Digimon Tamer. When you're constantly getting your Digimon into fights it ends up losing, your Tamer level will remain stagnant, or if you have managed to raise it up to that point, it could end up going down a rank. To raise it, you really just need to hunker down and raise your Digimon to higher levels. Getting it up to an ultimate form is an automatic Tamer level increase. You can also raise it by winning tournaments. Jot it down. We'll get to it. The Tamer level controls what percentage of your Digimon stats they carry over from one cycle into the next, so the higher your Tamer level, the better parameters they'll start out with after fading away and hatching out of a Digitama. Basically, the better you get at fully raising big, strong Digimon, the easier it will become to raise new, big, strong Digimon as you keep going. But sometimes, getting your Digimon ready for the outside world isn't just about getting them ready for combat. Sometimes, it's about a bit more than that. I should mention, this isn't alcohol. I'm not inebriated. This is root beer. I'm just tired. Not every Digimon out there on File Island is aggressive or out for a fight. They've lost their memories and scattered around, but some of them have just set up shop somewhere, trying to make the best out of the lives that they still have. As you venture out to find them, sometimes you'll need a bit more creativity than just coming in for a fight, and instead greet them with a willingness to help them out with their problems. Maybe you got some dudes in the mines that are trying to do some old-fashioned tunneling, and they need help moving these giant piles of dirt out of the way. It's really tedious, but it does open up the way to the cavern where you find a rampaging Marymon who's causing extreme heat and quakes and you have to convince him to stop. Some Digimon just need to be found at the right time of day as they hear about you trying to rebuild the city and actually approach you about wanting to help, aiding you in building bridges that help you reach new areas and such. It's actually kind of interesting how this one in particular is built up, as I think most of the rookie Digimon that you recruit towards the beginning of your journey will only join you after challenging you to a fight. Everyone is still lost and confused, and they're not going to just trust some random human stranger that shows up one day. But as you start to make your intentions known and word starts to spread about your efforts and how the city is starting to grow, you'll start to encounter more Digimon in the overworld that have an easier time trusting you, or some that will just actively be looking for you. And yeah, some of these little tasks you have to take care of to recruit people are, man, they sure are unique, I'll tell you what. Check this guy out, Monochromon. This big, beautiful Triceratops over here. He looks pretty cool. What do you think you need to do to get this guy to join File City? Maybe duke it out with him in a struggle of superiority? No, you gotta work retail. I kid you not, there is like a system to this shop of his, and you have to gain a certain amount of bits and profit for his business in order to gain his favor. This man is judging you entirely on your customer service skills, and you have to get this down pat. Sorry, did I say customer service? I meant customer manipulation. This entire minigame is based around Digimon coming in for something, and you determine by looking at what kind of Digimon they are, which is profiling by the way, if you should lower the price of the item, keep it the same, or upcharge them. Some Digimon will be kind of stingy. They don't want to give up their money very easily, and you gotta lower the price for them before they actually buy anything. With most Digimon just coming in to buy food, you want to keep the price the same, because even if you do upcharge them, it's only like by 8 bits, and it's not going to be a significant enough difference when trying to reach your goal. You might be able to upcharge Gatsumon on whatever he's trying to get, but it's not a guarantee. Your lucky break is actually when a Goburumon comes in, because I guess they just are very smart and you can manipulate them to your heart's content. That includes if they're coming in asking for your most expensive item, which is medicine. This is the most American game from Japan I've ever played. Thing is, once again, your goal is to get 3,000 bits in profit by the end of your shift, and Monochromon will come in at the middle and end of said shift to gauge your progress. And it's crazy enough that there's all this stuff to keep track of in here. They place a game with its own set of mechanics inside a game that is already drowning in mechanics, and to top it all off, it's kind of luck-based. The Digimon that come in and what they ask for is entirely randomized. You can know how to deal with every single person that walks through that door and know exactly how much money they are or are not willing to slap on your counter before they leave, and do absolutely everything right, and it won't matter because on this round, half your shift was taken up by everyone coming in asking for meat, in which case it is impossible to reach your sales goal. Man, I play video games to get away from this stuff, but I did eventually get it. You wanna know the craziest part though? It's actually not the quest that took me the longest. Yes, there is fishing in this game. So on the south of the island, there's this lake, Dragon Eye Lake, and here you can do some fishing. I actually really like fishing in video games. I think it's a good time. There's a reason I bought this ridiculous thing, but I didn't spend a lot of time doing it in this game because there's so much other stuff to do. Of course, I did find out you actually do want to get some fish from this place and keep them handy for a different quest in another location. Completely different requirements. It's fine. Thing is, I read a lot of forums and stuff online that were telling me that you have to get a really special rod from a specific location in this game to be able to do this part, and I found out that's actually not true at all. I accomplished this with the most basic fishing rod available on a mountain full of poop monsters using the most simple lure I could find, and all it cost me was, you know, a couple of real-life hours of my time. Basically, you have to wait for a really specific time of day for this huge shadow in the water to appear, at which time you want to cast your line in and, hope it grabs on. Once you've got a bite, you'll need to start reeling it in, but don't be too hasty. If the tension gets too high, the line will break and you'll have to try again. I was stuck here for a while. I mean, it was chill, but I remember this was the moment that I put together that this video was going to take a very long time to actually come out. Turns out you were fishing for a SydMontague, who's actually pretty laid back about being dragged by a hook in his face and offers to either teach your Digimon new techniques or become your friend and start ferrying you over to Beetle Land. It's a land, and there's beetles there. It's pretty neat. He also gives you a flute that you can use to just like contact him. It's like he's saying, dude, seriously, just call next time. I want to keep my cheek intact. This game is just full of stuff like this. Dudes you've got to battle, or Digimon that need to be saved, some guys that just want to talk, or maybe some really bizarre things like getting a Numamon, bringing it to Toy Town, and stuffing your little slug monster into this empty suit to evolve him into a Monzemon so you can free the place. I think one of the most memorable recruitments though is Ogremon. Ogremon is basically running a gang of thugs who are causing trouble all over the island, and after hearing a rumor about their misdeeds, you can trigger them to appear and start a bit of a rivalry with this guy. You chase him down, finding each of his hideouts one by one and teaching him a lesson each time. This is a rivalry that could span a significant portion of your playthrough, and it also helps highlight the importance of becoming familiar with this island itself, as you'll need to track down each new place he flees to. Once you take him down one last time, he reveals that his motivation for causing all this trouble was his defeatist belief that the island was doomed and that nothing would matter if everything was going to be destroyed anyway. But after seeing how powerful you are and witnessing your resolve to save everyone, it inspires him to join you in the city and help keep Digimon safe, finding a new purpose now that he thinks there's hope. That's what File City is to a lot of these Digimon. They don't know what sort of threat is on its way, they don't know what led them to be scattered or what caused this danger, they just have this feeling, a knowledge gnawing at the back of their minds telling them something is wrong, and it scares them. But seeing you there, helping bring everyone back and slowly developing File City back into a real community again, helps put them at ease and drive them to regroup with their peers and help each other. And this highlights one of the most important aspects of the game that I think is built up by how well you master its mechanics. File Island and the various Digimon that inhabit it are the very soul of Digimon World. As you continue to bring more and more Digimon back to File City, you'll see them start to accept tasks there, and watching this place grow over the course of the game is one of the greatest visual rewards this title has to offer. Early Digimon like Agumon will join and help out with stuff like running an item storage, so you can drop off important stuff with him and come back for it later when you have the space or need for it. Palmon will go to the meat farm and help grow larger supplies of meat rations. Kunemon will eat away at a bunch of foliage to open up a shortcut to a nearby bridge. Betamon will open a little item stall, and Elecmon will create lights to help illuminate the city at night. Stuff like that, which can range from a direct mechanical benefit to a cosmetic improvement that really helps add a sense of growth and character to the location. But as more powerful Digimon start to join your cause, you'll see many new benefits open up to you. They'll create new buildings and structures, or even improve on ones that were there already, allowing the residents to house incredibly helpful assets to your journey, like a clinic that you can take your Digimon to if they get hurt or tired, a restaurant where you can get meals prepped and add special stat gains to your partner, a bigger shop capable of housing and selling better items, or even Kabuterimon and Kawagumon joining your city and upgrading the gym so the training equipment helps make your Digimon gain stats faster. Not every recruited Digimon is, well, useful. Some of them just kind of hang out, like Sukamon. Okay, actually, I did find that on the occasion that I need to rack up care mistakes to get a certain evolution, I could just leave all the business to this one corner, and I swear he cleans it up sometimes. I think it might be totally random, like when he does it or whatever, but it has disappeared, so I'm pretty sure he has some use. But even Digimon that come to the city and don't really do much still help out your progression to some degree, as every time you recruit someone, they add to the city's prosperity points, and the amount they add, be it a value of 1, 2, or 3, is dependent on what level of Digimon they are. You can check your current prosperity points by talking to Gigimon, but be careful about when you do it. There are 2 points where talking to Gigimon and getting a prosperity point update from him will trigger a visitor and thus a mandatory battle. And oh man, I sure hope you're actually equipped for a fight once you get to 15 points, because otherwise when Greymon comes to test your strength, he might just break your little friend in half. The other encounter triggered this way is a little ways off though, initiating once you've accumulated 50 prosperity points, but we'll get to that part soon enough. There is such a good sense of progression here though, even in spite of the fact that your Digimon partner will routinely revert back to a much weaker form that needs to be trained back up. You can get so many new tools at your disposal through the recruitments that help make the training process become so much easier, and it really does feel like you're gaining more control and agency over the experience as you build new connections and strengthen your community. Not every attempt at this is perfect. The whole Piximon quest left me kind of disappointed. This man is an ultimate level Digimon who shows up in this one spot on this one screen, but the catch is that he only has a 3% chance of spawning in every time you enter said screen. So after spending a pretty generous amount of time going back and forth on these 2 screens, more times than I dare to count, I took him down with my buddy in crime and a lot of healing items, and he joined the shop and sold a training guide for a lot of money. So then I grinded, going through a ton of random battles against strong enemies to fatten up my wallet, and when I finally bought the thing and left it in my inventory to activate it while I trained, the results were minuscule. Why? Is it really so game-breaking to have just one item that supercharges your training? Like, is it really so unfair to have a reward like this when you have to put so much effort into getting it to begin with? You gotta put the work in to get this thing. Why isn't it more useful? But that's honestly just one example. Even out of the stuff that I didn't get a lot of use out of, I can't help but appreciate all these new additions that come to File City bit by bit. Like, I don't really go to Greymon's Arena very much, but I did think it was a really cool addition, letting you bring in your Digimon to come in and fight in a tournament, potentially earning yourself medals for some good old-fashioned bragging rights, and I think it also might raise your Tamer level. I still need to confirm that one though, that's just what I've seen a few sources claim. But there's a pride that comes with this, you know? A physical manifestation of your hard work in the form of the Digimon you've helped. Even the aesthetic charm gets to me. I'm in love with File City's nighttime theme. I think it's an especially fitting piece when you have a really powerful Digimon, someone who's tagging along with you and treading through dangerous territory and tangling with the toughest guys out there. But then they just suddenly die of old age, automatically returning you home as you see this powerful warrior return to a small, gentle soul who's relying on your help. This quiet little tune chiming in like a lullaby to return your mind to a simpler and more innocent place, just like your partner. And the rest of the soundtrack isn't slouching either. There's quite a few tracks here that really stood out to me and really helped sell the vibe of each each environment I traveled through. I think two of my favorites are the themes for the Gear Savannah and the Misty Trees. There are a couple of tracks that get kind of repetitive, and as much as I hate to say it, a little grating at times. I'm looking at you, main battle theme. I still like it well enough, but it makes it hard to listen to on its own, but some of the heavier battle themes that kick in for tougher enemies are really solid. But it's not just the OST that makes this world so much fun to explore, it's just such an interesting world all on its own. The environments are made up of pre-rendered backdrops with a fixed camera. This can, admittedly, make getting through some areas without getting sidelined by enemies a little on the impossible side, but I also think this is the best way to present things. These areas are so lovingly crafted, and there's this sort of visual quality to this sort of environmental setup that I absolutely adore from the PS1 era. Final Fantasy VII has some of my favorite examples. But I also just love the odd little ways things are scattered around here. You have stuff like batteries and vending machines, refrigerators, and all sorts of junk just sort of grown into the world around them. It's hard to discern their origin, but it adds this otherworldly feel that's so unique and really helps the Digimon world stand out as its own thing. It also kind of reminds me of certain aspects of the anime to a degree, and I'm not sure if that was a coincidence or not, but this sort of abandoned technology and overgrown wildlife vibe really works for this franchise. Actually, now that I think about it, the anime and this game actually have a lot of the same locations that the characters visit. I wonder if there actually was some collaboration there, or maybe there's just a good lore bible that each project was taking from. I also admire some of the ways that they play with these environments mechanically. Like discovering a new location has a solution that might only make sense in this world, but you're still led in the right direction, often by rumors from this little guy here, or from Shelmon's news bulletin if you recruit him to the city. And I mean weird stuff too, like coming up to this sheer cliff and the only way to make it to the land on the other side is to just walk out there. There's just an invisible bridge here, and you can simply walk across it to reach a new area. Or how Ogremon has a bunch of elevators around that don't just move on their own, but basically move entire land masses around and changing the environment. Where things really start to get tricky though is when you encounter certain locations that require a specific Digimon to enter, like Myotismon's mansion or the Ice Sanctuary. Another good reason I don't think the totally blind approach to raising your partner is always the go-to. These are some of the coolest locations in the game though, if only because they actually kind of feel like proper dungeons with puzzles to solve and a litany of enemies to conquer within. The only thing that maybe makes these a little more frustrating than I think they were meant to is the time restraint factor that hovers over the entire game, because you should only be entering these locations with an especially powerful Digimon, and those Digimon also have a pretty limited lifespan. It can feel a little tense just wondering if you'll actually be able to clear the area in enough time before your current partner fades away. Thankfully though, this is a fear that was never realized in my playthrough, and I actually really enjoyed making my way through these locations and putting all that training to the test. I also just really appreciated Myotismon here as well. He was one of the big things standing out to me as an example of how this game treated each of these characters as opposed to how other media in the franchise would. Like, if you've seen the original Digimon Adventure anime, you might remember Myotismon as one of the most intimidating villains in the whole series. But here, that context didn't exist for the developers, I guess, and they looked at the artwork and decided to make him a more respectable and mild-mannered lord character. Not lord as in an evil mastermind seeking conquest, more like someone who owns land in digital Scotland or something, I don't know. It's neat though. I imagine the only thing the devs had to go off of for their personality for each character is just the artwork, and they were able to write these characters in ways that seem to fit their design and place in the world. Other Digimon media would kind of follow this trend, letting the creatures act and interact with the stories in any way that seemed to best fit the current material, and it's a sense of freedom that I think lends to a better sense of world building for each individual project. And on that note, as you might remember, there was a greater purpose to bringing all of these lost Digimon together. As you progress through this world, you inch closer and closer to saving it. Throughout the island, you'll find more than just its scattered inhabitants, and by completing certain objectives and recruiting certain Digimon, you'll continue to gain access to new areas, either by way of shortcuts opening up for you or roadblocks being removed. While you search for more recruits, you'll also be trying to gather as much information as you can on this vague emergency threatening the world. And this process will take you through several key locations, but the thing is, you're not required to go in every location or even complete every quest that helps fill the blanks on what happened in this island's history. Because of that, this story can feel a little sloppy, and a lot of the big revelations can feel kind of redundant redundant. It's actually incredibly straightforward what's going on in this place, but you wouldn't know that just from the way that it's presenting all of this information to you. There are some portions that are kind of hard to miss, but stuff like the Toy Town mission, I didn't experience that until after completing the main story, and it actually does shed some light on the fact that your character is not the first human to travel to the digital world, and that there was once a war between the humans and Digimon here. Then again, this isn't the only place that decides to establish this. Your mission to find clues isn't smooth at first. It seems like there might be something important in the ancient Dino region where a meteor has touched down, but first you have to gain access to this place, which is being guarded by a Tyrannomon. After beating him, he reveals that the meteor crashed in a nearby area known as the Ancient Speedy Zone. It's a silly name, I know, but it does make sense. Time just runs at twice the normal speed here. It's literally more ancient than the area surrounding it, and you have to make sure to run through this area and find the meteor quickly before your Digimon grows too old. But once you find what you're looking for, it turns out to just be another Digimon named Meteormon. I guess there's a bunch of these guys just living in space and they sort of fall down here from time to time. There's a couple of little red herring missions like this where you hear about some kind of issue on the island and you figure it must be connected to the major threat looming over everyone, but it's more like one of the consequences of that major threat going unchecked, so it's still kind of showcasing the stakes of the sort of chaos this place has fallen into. It wasn't until I was pointed in the direction of the misty trees that stuff started to fall into place for me. First, I had to do something about this fog covering the area because I would just get lost in it otherwise. In the nearby Gecko Swamp, I found a Shogun Gekumon who agreed to teach me how to travel through the confusing terrain, allowing me to find Cherrymon, who's looking a lot creepier than he did in the official art, but it's fine. It's fine. Cherrymon is one of the few Digimon on the island who at least still has some of his memories from before the calamity struck, and he explains that about 80 years ago, the very island itself started to change, with new areas starting to form, and that's when everyone started to separate. The segregated Digimon began to speak new languages, not only forgetting their own history, but also how to communicate with one another, how to connect and be one. Some of them even started to lose their sense of self, becoming more primal, territorial, and violent. After a while, this sense of danger will become normal to them, with every Digimon on the island learning to ignore the warning of their impending doom, locking them in a cycle of apathy that would eventually lead to their own destruction. And yeah, he tells you that you need to gather a bunch of Digimon to File City to somehow combat the Great Emergency, which is something we already knew. Again, I think because so many of these encounters are optional and you could experience them in several different orders, a lot of the information is very samey, and it kind of feels like no one encounter is going to give you the biggest piece of the puzzle or anything. From here, the next big exposition drop I got was from Factorial Town, a place I wasn't able to enter until pretty late in my playthrough after recruiting Waymon and having him ferry me over there. I still had to jump through some hoops to get any information from this place. Andromon is just sitting here in his little computer room completely in denial that anything is wrong in his town because he's convinced that the Giromon responsible for keeping this town's systems running properly could never be subject to any kind of issue himself. And yeah, our hero has seen enough of this island to know that's absolutely not true and sets off to go knock some sense into the madness-driven Chainsaw Boy. Once Giromon's been knocked out, Andromon admits that he was wrong to dismiss your concerns and starts looking into repairing the town's logs to find out where everything started going wrong. And once again confirms that several humans made their way to the digital world at some point in time, and some sort of struggle between the analog people, as they call them, and the Digimon broke out. But apparently, the humans lost that fight and it seemed like they were all wiped out. But after their disappearance, the island almost doubled in size, and that's when all the confusion separating the Digimon on the island started. Clearly, there was one or several humans that survived the struggle and have some sort of influence in this world that allows them a level of control over it, like, say, creating the northern part of the island and presumably driving the world's inhabitants to madness. It sounds strange at first because the struggle started 100 years ago, but Mamio brings up that he hasn't really needed to eat or sleep like he normally would, and surmises that the time in the digital world affects him and presumably other people differently than it does Digimon. Once you've gained 50 or more prosperity points, you can finally make some progress towards the finale, as the entrance to an area called Mount Infinity has opened up. But as soon as you step outside of Digimon's hut, you're attacked by Airdramon, who's been brainwashed and set to stop you from entering the mountain. After a decent little fight, Airdramon is knocked out and recovers with Digimon, and it's on to the final area. Mount Infinity is an absolute gauntlet. The spaces are pretty tight, there's enemies absolutely everywhere, and a pretty good amount of the encounters in this place are mandatory, meaning you'll need to take out a lot of these guys in order to move from floor to floor. And then there's more than a couple boss Digimon in there to challenge you as well. I decided to take this place with my Metal Greymon. Yeah, I know he's kind of the basic way to go, but I just love how cool he is. He's an absolute powerhouse, and as much as I love the color orange, the almost zombie cyborg look he has with the blue color palette makes this old design for Metal Greymon my favorite. I mean, there's a reason they promoted this game so heavily with him front and center. But this place was also tough, and I could tell I wasn't quite ready for it yet. And then, while I was out trying to clean up a couple of quests and grind for money so I could stock up on items before taking this place on again, he died of old age. Okay, bye, Metal Greymon. Hi, Punymon. You're looking cute, young, and defenseless. Look alive, soldier, we've got a game to finish. Train, 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 train. There we go, we've got another Andromon and we're ready to roll. I actually sort of started this journey through Mount Infinity just planning to grind for some money so I could get tons of recovery items, but I found I was actually doing pretty well and just sort of kept going. We stomped through this area with some challenge, but we actually made it through. Someone sneezed in our general direction? That sounds like a challenge. Devimon, down. Metal Greymon, put to sleep. Megadramon, you're actually not required to fight him. He's totally optional, so I just kind of left him be to keep things moving along and save on items, but I might be back. And then we finally came face to face with the guy behind it all. A lone human who survived the previous war with the Digimon. He has no name, only a title. The Analog Man. It doesn't really sound very cool being spoken out loud, but whatever, it's fine. This guy honestly doesn't have a lot of depth to him, but his simple outlook towards the things around him is part of what's made him such a threat up to this point. He looks at Digimon and the world they inhabit as nothing more than simple programs. Programs that can be rewritten to serve a purpose, and he simply wants to continue taking away their freedoms and minds until they are nothing but his own digital slaves. He proposes a challenge, his strongest slave against your ideals of friendship and unity, summoning his ultimate warrior, Machinedramon. As the lore of the franchise goes, Machinedramon is not only one of the strongest Digimon in existence, but also one of the most fearsome, and in a way, one of its most disturbing. You can look at all the cyborg Digimon with their weapon enhancements and see how their parts were stripped from their bodies, torn from them piece by piece, and melded together into this one massive creature built from the ground up as a being of destruction. It's lacking a soul with no free will like other Digimon have, only focused on annihilating anything or anyone put in its path, and a physical manifestation of the Analog Man's ideals and dismissiveness. A cold, heartless machine displaying how he sees every Digimon on the island. Not as friends, not as individuals who have had their lives uprooted and who deserve their own agency and free will, but as monsters to command as he pleases. To this day, I absolutely love this creature. It has one of my favorite monster designs of all time and has somehow maintained the same level of cold dread in the franchise decades after his debut. Machinedramon is the perfect final boss for this game and a true intimidating force. And he absolutely wiped us out. I ended up running out of items to feed Squeeb and we were just kind of kicked back to Gigimon's house, but honestly, I wasn't even disappointed. I was fully expecting that this guy was gonna be a tough challenge, and even if I had to run through that entire area again, I really wasn't too worried about it, because I actually had a little trick up my sleeve. I mentioned earlier that there's these little monitors scattered all over the overworld that act like chests and you can get items out of them. Well, I kept picking up these chips that raise your Digimon's stats by like a lot. Like feeding them this one item instantly raises their stats by what would normally take half a day of training on that one attribute. And as soon as I figured out what they did, I decided to not use any of them. Not yet. I dropped every single one I found in the game off with Agumon's item bank and stockpiled them, knowing that if the last stretch of this game was going to pose me a challenge, I was going to be more than prepared. With that said, after losing to Machinedramon, I went to the item bank and took out all of my chips. I fed Squeeb every single one. Stocked up on as many healing and MP items as I could and a couple of revives just to be safe, and went to town. On our return trip through the final dungeon, we blew through everything like it was nothing. I had created an absolute unit of destruction. We were so powerful. It was so satisfying. It was so wizard, as the kids would say. And I eventually made it back to this mechanical atrocity for round 2. Fighting this thing and watching him fall felt so good. I actually did a little fist pump and cheered when I finally took him down, and it's been a long time since a final boss felt like I had to earn a victory that much. As Monochromon falls, Analog Man panics and uses a portal to escape back to the real world, using a monitor to taunt our hero and the entire island, claiming that he's wired File Island in its entirety to blow through an explosive device that he's planted deep beneath the mountain. I like to think this is the emergency that's been referred to for the entire game. Like he's basically been rewriting the code of the island itself to explode from beneath, and the Digimon could tell that something dangerous has been done to their home, they just didn't know what. But as Airdramon creates a portal to help you escape, the Digimon you've recruited throughout your adventure chime in to offer their support and help send the destruction code and a feedback to the corrupt man's own base in reality, causing the explosion to fail on File Island, but instead destroy his servers, possibly his entire base, and presumably killing him. You return to File City, the home that you've helped rebuild, surrounded by the friends you've made and those whose world you've protected. The mission is complete, and after a sweet little goodbye, Mamio decides that it's time to return to the real world, and the credits begin to roll. And yes, technically there is more, as the next time you turn the game on, you're greeted with a cutscene of Mamio trying to convince his friends of everything that took place, who obviously don't believe him, before a Mamemon jumps out of his Digivice, VPET, whatever you want to call it, and warns him that the Analog Man has returned and welcomes you back to File Island. Really, all this is a narrative excuse for a post-game that allows you to go back and do anything you didn't get to finish, recruit missing Digimon, attain new evolutions, gain medals in the arena, and offers you a couple of secret bosses, but the Analog Man is only kind of, sort of, not really back, and you don't really get a lot out of this beyond a tougher rematch with Monochromon and a secret boss against an egg. Look, just don't worry about it. But I'm not worried about all of that right now. I want to go back and 100% this at some point. I want to get all the evolutions. I want to see how many medals I can collect, finish all the recruitments, collect the cards. Oh, right, there's a trading card collecting mechanic in this game too, but no, not today. Have you seen the runtime on this thing? We're done. This is the most I've ever talked about one game in a single video before, and I've said just about everything I can possibly think of, but it does still leave us with one major question, and it's one that I still don't know if I can properly answer. Do I recommend Digimon World? I've never played a game like this before. To call Digimon World one of the most unique RPGs I've ever experienced would do a disservice to the amount of time I've dedicated to this title, to this world. Despite any gripes I've had with Digimon World, despite how long and overdrawn the mechanics are, regardless of how poorly some things are communicated, even despite the insane amount of time and patience this game asks from you, maybe. I think that's the best answer I have. This is one of those games that challenges what I consider to be a good or bad video game. This title does so many things wrong by conventional standards. It relies on so many mechanics, and it's up to you to take the pieces it hands you and use them to build your way forward. Sometimes the results won't be what you expect. They may not even be what you want, but they matter. The connection you form with the Digimon on the island, to File City, to your partner, or even to the time you've spent learning what this game wants from you and how to get the most out of it, that's what the game's about. That is its mark of quality. Sure, not every mechanic is laid out in the most digestible way, but we could say the same thing about the early days of Minecraft, where you had to read through forums and guides to understand how basic elements like crafting worked, and people seem to kinda make it work. And yeah, figuring out how to trigger certain events can be a little confusing until you've actually got the right Digimon in your city to help tell you rumors about what's happening on the island. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like there aren't elements of the game that don't really hold up. But there's a cathartic feeling to the controlled tedium of the training and evolution process, or the repetitive battles that demand a strange, hands-off but also hands-on approach. And there's a real sense of pride and accomplishment that comes with arriving in this world where everything, even the way the game is played, is stacked against you, and you persevere anyway. Now, are there ways to improve this gameplay setup? Well, for sure. I mean, stuff like maybe being able to raise more than one Digimon at a time, or keep a save of one on standby for when you need their help on a particular task. Stuff like giving you clear hints at how to achieve certain evolutions or make the training buffs mean a little bit more, but there were follow-ups to this game, and one day we'll have to look at these and see how they held up, if they improved on the formula enough, or if they managed to maintain the heart the original game had. And yeah, this game has a soul, dude. You can feel how much these developers cared about this project, how much they wanted to make a living, functional world that felt real to the player, and I'm sure they couldn't wait to see people enjoy what they created. And it's good to see this game still getting love today, with rumors of a possible remake or remaster under some consideration, or right down to how the new card game even has artwork depicting stuff from this title, showing that there are people behind the scenes that still remember this one fondly. Not every Digimon game would play like this. It actually took a while before this game design would make a return in the franchise, but there was always some merit here, and I'm glad other people saw that too. Like, even if this didn't click for some people, this structure was still worth another shot. And who knows, maybe there's some other amazing Digimon experiences that we can still uncover, but I'm not sure I'd survive doing another Digimon review unless it was like my full-time job. Until the day we return to the digital franchise, yeah, try it out, give it a spin. For a lot of you, this will not be your kind of game, but for those of you that this clicks with, there will be few experiences that can quite compare to Digimon World. I probably could have trimmed this down a bit, made it shorter, but I didn't want to. Even now, there's a couple of things I know I didn't mention in this review, but maybe those are things for you to discover if you pick this game up for yourself. But now that we're finally done with this retrospective, I'm not taking another break, I'll tell you that. I'm probably not doing Metroid Month this year, but that does give me more time to finally get back to a couple of reviews that I've been meaning to make for a long time. And if you've stuck with me throughout this entire giant, stupid long video about a Digimon video game from like 20-something years ago, thank you. For helping us reach 8,000 subscribers, for helping keep this channel alive and afloat. Thank you for supporting me on Patreon, for liking, commenting, subscribing, any of that, or for just tuning in. Until next time, remember that my top tier patrons get to see these videos 2 days early. You can find me on Twitter, Twitch, Discord, Sunset City, whichever you prefer, links in the description, and of course, as always, spread the word, tell your friends, and until we see each other again, thank you so much for watching. See you next mission. Hey there everyone, I am going to keep things a little brief. I am pretty much recording this at the 11th hour. Pretty much all I have left to do now is splice together the music into the video and get the Patreon version out and ready. But I do just want to say thank you. This is a project that I just did not anticipate. I don't think I was really prepared for something like this, and I completely misunderstood what was going to have to go into it. I've had this in the planning process at least since last year. Never did I fathom what this was going to turn into something that was going to be like just chasing me. It was going to be in the back of my mind for the better part of 2022. But it means so much to finally have it out there. I'm so proud of having this finally put together, and it means the world to each and every person that has sat down and watched this and experienced what I've just been gruelingly working on for months on end at this point. I do have some much easier stuff planned for the very near future. So it shouldn't be too long before the next video. Again, no Metroid Month this year, but there is still stuff on the horizon. Of course, I wouldn't get to do any of this. I wouldn't be in as good of a place as I have been if it wasn't for my Patreon supporters. You guys have been like one of the biggest things that has helped me keep going through the content creation like phases. It's support that I cannot put into words. And of course, I do have to give a very special shout out to my top tier patrons in this month. They are Brendan Hess, Christine Larkin, Earl Valco, Jeremiah Harrison, Lederick, Mackenzel, Mr. SP, Wonton Photo, NBTV, Nickel Plated, Patricia Marcoux, Cinder N7, and Cirrus the Skeptic. Thank you guys so much. I love you all. You make it possible, and you make it worth it. With all of that said, I don't have a whole lot more to add here. I think I've said about all I can for this video, so it's time to get to work on the next one. And I will see you next mission.